We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. MLK said that, Dr. King. And it works with this parsha really well. When Mika spoke about Jacob wrestling with an ish, which, himself, whatever it was in that moment, the end of that story is as instructive as the part that she taught. Just after they go through their struggle, the ish, the man, the angel, whatever it was, changes Jacob's name to Yisrael because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. And Jacob said, "Can I get your name, please, sir?" And whoever he was wrestling with was like, "No, you may not have my name." But that person, that entity, blessed Jacob on that spot. And so after Jacob received his blessing after the wrestling match, Jacob called the place Peniel, the face of God. Why? Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim, because I saw God here, face to face. Vatinatzel nafshi, and I survived. I saw God and I survived. Of course, the story never tells us that Jacob saw God. That's Jacob's own understanding of what might have been happening in that place. Not too long later, when he and Esav, his brother, reunite, a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear before the two of them came back together. He knew that Esav had an army with him, or 400 people, what he assumed was an army. He sent lots of gifts in advance. He prepared his family to be slaughtered. He split them up. He divided them. And then he had to face that fear. There was no way around Esav. There was only toward Esav. And so that's what happened. He passed by his whole family and he started bowing. Va-Yishlakh arza sheva pa'amim. He bowed 7 times ad gishto until he approached ad achiv, his brother. And as he came closer and closer, Esav ran towards him, v'ibchehu, and hugged. They embraced. Vayipol al tzavarav, and Esav fell onto his brother's neck. It's exactly how we thought the story wasn't going to go. I mean, if you've heard the story before, you know by now, this is how the story goes. But the story wants us to read it each and every time as if we're reading it for the first time, and that story sets us up for a battle. Va-Yishlakh, and then they kiss, vayibku, and they cry. Imagine Esav on his brother's shoulder. After all of those years, the same brother who stole his birthright and his blessing, and now he is crying on his shoulders. Vayisa et einav, and Esav lifts up his eyes, vayar, and he looks and he sees Jacob's whole family, and he says, Mi elala, who are all these people? This is incredible. I have a bigger family than I actually thought. And one by one, they all start to approach Esav. And then he says, why'd you bring all this stuff for me, these gifts? And Jacob said, well, because I didn't want you to kill me, so that I would find favor in your eyes. And Esav says, Yeshli ravachi, my brother, I have enough. I have enough. Yehi lecha asher lach. You keep what's yours. Jacob had become very wealthy for 21 years, in 21 years with Lavan. Vayomer Yaakov, alna. No, you please take these gifts. Imna matzati chen be'enecha. If you find favor in my eyes, v'lakachta min chati miadi. Please take my gifts. Ki al ken ra'iti panacha kirot panei Elohim. Because it is this moment which has caused me to understand that I have been looking at you ke Elohim, as like seeing the face of God. Like seeing the face of God. You have received me favorably. Jacob wrestles with an Ish, survives, names the place face of God because he survived. Jacob faces an actual Ish, his brother, and says at the end of that reunion, in which he also thought he was going to die, seeing you is like seeing the face of God. And right here in this moment, the Torah has given us the deepest theological lesson it could ever produce in any moment. If you want to see God, you will find it in the face of another human being. And it will likely come after you have faced your fears, after a moment in which you thought, I can't do this. This is too hard for me. Va-Yishlakh anav vayar. And he lifted his eyes and he saw. Now I know what God looks like, Jacob said. Now I know what God looks like. It looks like this. A face that I feared from afar and close proximity now is unexpectedly soft and open and maybe even ready for me, who I am in the world. The philosopher Martin Buber wrote, when two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. When two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. The great French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas taught a similar lesson but from a place of ethics. Levinas taught that justice rendered to the other, to my neighbor, gives me an unsurpassable proximity to God. Levinas lays out a very distinctive ethical construct that centers on our encounter with other human beings, like Jacob and Esau encountered one another, encounters that are mediated through the face. And here I don't mean a literal seeing necessarily. That can't be what the Torah asks of us, because that is not how everybody moves through the world. But it is a deep seeing nonetheless. Encounters are mediated through the face. The obligation that comes with encountering another human being is an enormous one, an infinite obligation. Each eye is totally responsible for the other whom they encounter face to face. Levinas says that we are obligated to do more for every person we encounter than we are in fact able to do. A face-to-face encounter obligates me to you in a way that already places a burden on me that I will never ever be able to fulfill. It's what he calls a relation of prayer. The other commands us, Levinas said, as God would command us. The transcendence of a stranger who cannot fully be known commingles with the transcendence of a God. When I meet somebody face to face, the transcendence of what happens in that moment is the transcendence of God. Buber, Levinas, Jacob and Esau, they are all teaching us the very same lesson. It is the lesson that when I am feeling emotions, overwhelming emotions about others, about who I am in the world, the very best thing I can do to seek out divinity is find a face to encounter that obligates me to something bigger than myself, because it's not about me, it's about we. We must learn together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. When two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. Here's what I've learned doesn't work in creating divine encounters. Angry emails don't work. Hiding behind a keyboard can't create a face-to-face Jacob-Esau encounter when there is a ton of nervous, anxious, fearful energy flowing between two people. That definitionally obviates the possibility of an ethical encounter. The way forward always in communities like this in cities like this, in countries like this, in a world like this, with all of its conflict, is face-to-face encounter, which immediately creates a softness that necessitates an ethical posture of, I owe you something, now that we have seen one another. I want us to draw closer. I want us to draw closer, softer, courageously, in person, together. It's the Torah's way forward, at least in my opinion, and I believe it should be ours too. Shabbat Shalom.